Baby girl keeps tripping store alarm. Doctor tells mom she's not a baby. The alarm rang again, the shrill sound making her grind her teeth as she squinted. Not again, she whispered under her breath. She hurried down to her daughter, looking straight into her eyes. People were already watching, wondering what kind of mom she was. If only they knew what she was going through. Melissa Harding thought she'd make a good mom. She'd always dreamt of the day she'd bring a child into the world, a beautiful soul for her to love, nurture, and raise. But so far, the journey hadn't been easy. Although she never admitted it to anyone, being a mom was amongst the most challenging things she had to do. But Melissa had her reason for having such a bleak outlook. It all started with a visit to the local Walmart. Melissa had taken her 3-year-old Haley to get a few items to their kitchen. She rarely brought her daughter out to the public like this and usually left her with either her husband Tom or a babysitter. But today Tom was away and Melissa couldn't get a hold of the babysitter. She had no idea what would happen when she got to the store. All eyes were on Melissa the moment she and Haley stepped into Walmart. Melissa had never had this much attention on her and couldn't help but feel out of place. She straightened her dress and patted Haley's hair, knowing the attention would remain on them until they walked out the store. She had no clue that she'd end up breaking the internet, and not for the right reasons. Like any shopper bringing their child into a store, Melissa was vigilant. She picked up a cart, placed her daughter inside, and hurried to the grocery section. The store was bringing with shoppers today, so Melissa had to squeeze between them to get her desired aisles. But as she picked out apples and oranges for smoothies, she noticed something that made her pause. 3 women had huddled up in a corner, whispering as they jutted their chins directly at Melissa and her baby. They giggled as they talked, clearly amused by whatever they were discussing. Melissa didn't let this get to her. She picked what she needed from the aisle and quickly walked away, but her problems were only starting. As she pushed her cart across the aisle, she realized more women were looking at her, but they weren't smiling or giggling. No, they were faces painted with pure disdain. Some even rolled their eyes at her, others clearing their throats as she passed. She didn't understand what was happening, but she would soon as she got to her car. Melissa and Haley had spent 20 minutes in Walmart before Melissa hurried them to the checkout section. The mom was covered in sweat, apprehensively looking over her shoulder. The eyes that had been on her as she shopped were still glued on her every move, but there was more. Each of those disdainful moms had pulled out their phones, taking pictures and videos of Melissa. But why were they doing that? Melissa couldn't put a finger on it. She turned around, presenting her items to the cashier, but he too stared at her like she'd committed the most heinous war crime in human history. "I'm sorry," she said worriedly. "I can't help but notice all the looks I'm getting. Is there something I did wrong?" She looked at her dress. For the longest time, she'd felt insecure about how she looked. Her insecurities had seemingly gained sentience and grown after she had Haley. She'd spent hours in yoga classes in the gym wherever possible. Although she felt a little comfortable now, the body dysmorphia that had dogged her before wasn't completely gone. She needed to know if that was the reason these women were staring and recording her. But the cashier didn't answer. With a privileged look, he handed Melissa her items and turned away, ready to serve the next customer. Melissa took Haley and quickly walked away. Something had convinced her that it was her dress, hair, or how she looked, but the reason would be much more different and heartbreaking than what she thought. Melissa walked to the store doors, keen on returning home where no one would judge or record her, but a shrill noise issued when she walked through the store's threshold. Melissa paused in place, looking around. She stepped back and the ringing stopped. Surely she couldn't be the one who caused it. The sound only came up when someone was stealing from the store. Melissa paid for everything she'd taken off the shelves, or did she? She returned to the counter, placing her items on the ceramic surface. "I'm so sorry for this," she said. She could spy 2 security guards already running to her. The entire store had paused in its movements, with the women that had been staring at Melissa when she came in now chuckling and smirking. What was going on here? Melissa emptied all her goods from her bags, asking the cashier if he could run them through the machine to ensure she'd paid for them. "That's not how that works, ma'am," the cashier said, smacking on a chewing gum he'd just opened. "Did you by any chance stuff an item into a pocket?" he asked, his gaze slowly lowering to Haley. What are you trying to insinuate?" she asked the cashier with quirked brows. Her baby had never had sticky hands. She was excellent and well trained. But Melissa still went down to her, quickly patting her down to make sure she hadn't carried anything in her clothes. The worried mom couldn't feel a thing. Melissa's daughter hadn't taken anything from the shelves. Melissa hated the way that the cashier had insinuated Haley was a thief. To make matters worse, Melissa had spent her entire time here under the scrutiny of the other women. She hadn't signed up to be bullied like this when she left home. She'd show these people who she really was. With a grimace, she turned to the security guards that were now reaching her vicinity. "Your manager now," she demanded, and picked up Haley. Her brazenness took them by surprise, but they walked her to the store office, introduced her to the manager who was willing to hear her story, but his face darkened the moment she laid eyes on Melissa and Haley. "I just walked through the door and the alarm went off," Melissa hissed. Rocking Haley in her arms, she demanded to know why that happened. "I paid for everything in my bags," she said. "Your cashier says my daughter might have taken something. I can assure you that she didn't." But that was only half of the story. "But I'm not as upset about this as I am about the group of women who kept staring and recording me while shopping. I didn't come here to be recorded, sir." The man paled at the comments. He looked at Melissa for a few seconds before leaning into his seat. His solution to the matter would leave her speechless. Seemingly worried about the store's outlook in the community, the man said the alarm going off must have been a fluke. "We get those sometimes," he added. Getting up from his seat, he looked straight at Haley and asked Melissa if the little girl was doing all right. "She is," Melissa answered with furrowed brows. "Why do you ask?" "Nothing," the manager answered in a dismissive tone, "just making small talk." He walked to the door and called one of the guards in. "Please escort our customer here to her car. Help with her bags, okay?" The guard nodded and pointed Melissa to the store exit. Melissa couldn't help but wonder what was going on, but she didn't need to be here a minute longer than needed. She had no clue that her life as she knew it would be over by the end of the day. She hated this. The manager had just thrown out another insinuation at the expense of her child. She knew it wasn't small talk, but what did he really mean? Melissa wouldn't let anyone make fun of her child, but she should have taken the question seriously. She had no clue that her life as she knew it would be over by the end of the day. The guard walked her to the exit, helping with her bags as Melissa held Haley. The guard was the first to pass through the door with Melissa's items, but the minute the mom and her daughter walked through, the alarm blared. Melissa cursed, stepping back as fast as she could. She looked up at the guard who had also frozen in place. Something was definitely wrong, but she had no idea that she'd be questioned as a mother in a matter of moments. Melissa tried her best not to panic, but her daughter started getting antsy from all the commotion. She didn't want people getting the wrong idea. The last thing she needed was people finding out her secret. She told Haley to be well behaved. If she lost control now, things would escalate, but the mother had no idea she was going down that road one way or another. A cold sensation washed over Melissa as the alarm kept blaring. Caught in a web of accusations as the goring sound echoed through the store's entrance, the crippling feeling morphed into pure panic. The once plain look the guard gave Melissa turned to a suspicious glance that made her feel the full weight of the situation she was in. Shoppers turned their heads, their eyes fixated on her and Haley. The guard's expression shifted from mild annoyance to suspicion. It was as if the weight of the world had crashed down upon Melissa's shoulders. Everything that Melissa did next would have a consequence. Melissa felt sweat dripping down her face. She was understandably nervous, but there was something she didn't see. Her daughter had a secret that no one else knew. It would have everyone up in arms, but they wouldn't understand the unique condition her daughter had. She never got any complaints before. Why was it a problem now? But Haley would do something her mother never thought possible. Melissa couldn't believe how they were being treated. There was something about Haley that others didn't know about. It was something Melissa tried not bringing attention to, but now it seems it had. She remembered when she gave birth to her years ago and how the daughters reacted. They gave her baby girl the same attention. The doctors told a concerned mother there was something off about her child. They couldn't tell her what the problem was, and it went undiagnosed for years. But after the altercation, she would finally understand and make the public understand what was going on. It would explain the stare she was getting in the end. Amid the chaos, one of the women shouted, "Thief! She's the thief!" The accusation cut through the tense air like a sharp knife, instantly snaring the attention of the surrounding crowd both outside and inside the store. Things were escalated and getting out of hand. She knew she was innocent. How could a mob form against her? But she had no idea what her daughter had done. It amplified Melissa's panic, rooting her in place. Whispers of judgment and condemnation started swirling around her, drowning out reason and understanding. She trusted her daughter more than anything. She knew she would never steal anything, but when the dust settled, she would be angry not because of her actions, but because of what the public did to her daughter. Melissa felt the ground turn hot beneath her feet, crumbling as the guard before her hesitated. She could tell he was torn between duty and doubt. It looked like he wanted to do the right thing, but he had a job he had to do. Melissa closed her eyes and feared the worst. She thought her daughter was a good girl. She was about to learn the truth behind everything. Desperation and tears welled up in her eyes as she realized just how bad all this looked. She pleaded, "Please, you have to believe me, I haven't stolen anything." She thought she was in hot water with the store, but she had no idea that the public was about to get involved. Harsh words about her daughter would be thrown about that made her blood boil. But the tide of public opinion had already turned the guard against her. Whatever she'd say now wouldn't help when everyone was seemingly out to get her. The store manager, alerted by the commotion, hurried over. His face was etched with mistrust, even though he already told Melissa the alarm might have had issues. Ignoring Melissa's pleas, he gestured to the guard who reluctantly detained her. This was the beginning of the end for her. She couldn't have a criminal record, but she was innocent, right? She could never have imagined actually getting into trouble since she didn't do anything wrong, but it wasn't her that they were concerned about. With Haley crying in her arms, Melissa followed the guard back to the manager's office. Her heart shattered into a million pieces as she looked at her daughter. No child was meant to go through this much trauma. But the girl had a secret that no one else knew about that caused all the stares. Melissa just hadn't noticed it. The world had cast Melissa as a criminal, unjustly tarnishing her reputation and subjecting her to the merciless grip of humiliation. Her soul ached as she realized the depth of the sorrow awaiting her and her innocent daughter. But that's when she realized something strange about the situation. Something wasn't right. News of Melissa's alleged theft spread like wildfire through social media. Her name became synonymous with shame and guilt even before she got out of the manager's office. Unknown to her, the video recordings taken by those judgmental shoppers were going viral, provoking an onslaught of harsh comments and condemnation from faceless online users, but this was only the first half of her nightmare. The truth, however, remained obscured by the relentless barrage of negativity. It was even worse that Melissa had no idea what was going on. She couldn't defend herself when she didn't know she was under attack. The cyberbullying and assumptions dragged her name through the mud, but something worse was barreling her way. That's when Melissa decided that enough was enough. She needed to defend her daughter. She told him to stop videoing her. It was upsetting for her daughter, but Melissa was missing the point. There was a reason why people were recording. They had their attention on something she hadn't considered. In the wake of the scandal, the manager was the only one to see through the unfair lynching Melissa was going through. He didn't tell her what was happening online, only asked that she follow a guard out of the store. He asked her not to look at the other shoppers. There was no need to focus her energy on them when all they wanted to do was see her suffer. He had no clue what they would do to Melissa. The manager called another security guard, telling him to ensure Melissa made it to her car. The guard had a kind face, kinder than the last one. He was big and burly, towering over Melissa and the manager. He'd protect her from the crowd, but he didn't see anything wrong with the little girl, something the crowd did. He offered to carry Melissa's bag, even saying he could help her with little Haley, but Melissa wouldn't let go of her kid. Still, she was thankful for the man's kindness. She should have known that even he wouldn't protect her from what was coming. Her daughter was about to expose what was really going on, and she wouldn't be able to stop her. As she had done with the last guard, Melissa followed this new one to the store exit. Everyone had stopped shopping and stared at her and Haley with bated breaths. Others were already recording, while others hurled mean words and cursed her. They all froze as Melissa neared the door. Would the alarm go off again? It's okay, the guard smiled and motioned to Melissa. Just walk through. Melissa closed her eyes, walking past the store threshold. The alarm screeched in her ears, but she didn't listen. She was finally out of the building and wouldn't return anytime soon. Buyers inside the store started calling her names, others rushing after her. Why are they treating her this badly? Melissa knew something was wrong the moment she stepped into the store. The other women had been glaring at her the minute she walked in. The alarms going off were something else just to add to the real problem, but Melissa was ready to put all this behind her. Little did she know what was truly happening behind the scenes. The walk was short since she'd parked her car just outside the store door. She quickly placed Bailey into her seat and hurried to load her items into the back. But unbeknownst to her, the war against her had taken a different turn. What had started as an online lynching of a thief had developed into something worse. As if that wasn't enough, something else was happening right behind Melissa's back. After Melissa placed Haley in her seat, the 3-year-old hurriedly climbed down, opened the car door, and ran back into the store. Neither Melissa nor the guard saw her do it until it was too late. "Mommy, mommy!" she screamed from the other side of the store's door. "Look at me!" Melissa's heartbeat paused. "No!" Melissa cried as she ran toward the store door. "Come here, Haley!" she beckoned. "Come to mommy!" Haley ran away from the safety of the security guard and closer to the angry mom. Melissa screamed out in panic. What were they gonna do to the little girl they'd had their eyes on for so long? She heard people shouting at the girl, trying to communicate something. A grinning Haley waved at her, dancing around in her pink dress. The ugly look that everyone was giving Melissa earlier had morphed into smiles. "Come to me," Melissa called. Haley ran to her, but the store alarm screeched as she passed the door. She couldn't believe that the sound came from her daughter. That's when the truth finally came to light. That's when the roar from the crowd became even louder. Among the voices, she could make out some of what they were saying. She heard people saying things like her socks. What did they mean? Melissa would soon learn exactly why the crowd was so angry and what they'd seen that she'd missed. They didn't understand her unique condition, but Melissa would shed light on that soon enough. Melissa looked at her with wide eyes. What was happening? She hugged Haley, lifting her into the air. As she carried her, she quickly checked her clothes, ensuring she wasn't holding anything from the store. She heard the crowd scream again. She heard a clear voice telling her to look at her sock. Melissa couldn't understand what they meant until she looked. That was when Melissa saw it. A miniature doll that must have fallen into the cart while she was perusing toys at the store now hung from Haley's sock. But the toy still didn't explain the dirty looks Melissa had gotten from everyone else in the store. There was something else going on, but the mother didn't focus on that. She just wanted to get home safely. Melissa didn't want to find out why, at least not here and after everything they'd gone through. She gave the guard the doll and strapped her child into the back seat before driving away. She wanted the whole ordeal to be over with, but the mother didn't know it wasn't over just yet. She was about to be ridiculed for the weirdest reason. As the store disappeared into her rearview mirror, she smiled. This was all behind her now, an unfortunate ordeal the universe had decided to pit her and Haley against each other. But she wasn't even on the interstate before her phone started ringing. She looked down at her phone but didn't expect to see her husband. It all had to do with what just happened. Melissa answered the call through her car before pulling to the side of the road. Her husband Tom asked her if she'd taken her daughter to Walmart. Melissa said she was on her way from the store right now. Did her husband want her to pick something up on the way home? No. Tom's reason for calling was completely different. He informed Melissa she was trending on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The reason that had first centered on her calling her a thief before moving on to their daughter Haley. The mother couldn't believe the accusations directed at her, but it would be nothing next to what they did to Haley. People were mocking Haley's health, saying she was too big for her assumed age. Some were fat-shaming the baby, claiming that Melissa was a bad mom for feeding her so much, but they had no idea what they were talking about. Melissa had always been a sensitive person. She usually tore down whenever people judged her too harshly, but today the emotion didn't evoke tears but burning anger. None of the people judging her knew that for the past 2 years, little Haley had been struggling with Prader-Willi syndrome, a rare genetic condition that affected her metabolism as an infant. She couldn't eat in her early years and had spent months in the hospital because of being overweight. It got so bad that Melissa wasn't sure she'd make it through. As a new mom, this was all new to her. She used to cry every night praying to God to save her kid. She even took months away from work driving to the hospital to spend her days with Haley. It was only now that Haley was finally getting her appetite back. She was experiencing food for the first time and loved every bit of it. With this newfound newfound love came an insatiable appetite. Although Melissa was glad her baby was finally eating, she was alarmed about the rate at which Haley was wolfing down her food. Of course, she took her to the pediatrician. With a humble laugh, he said, "She's not a baby anymore, she's your little werewolf." Melissa sat in silence as she read the comments in her car. "Mommy, look!" Haley called behind her, pointing at a pink car. "It's pink." Melissa smiled as her eyes grew wet. No mean daughters about her or her daughter would ever remove her gratitude.